Welcome to Crack You. In this question, a block of mass 0.1 kilogram is held against a wall by applying a horizontal force of 5 Newton on the block. If the coefficient of friction between the block and the wall is 0.5, the magnitude of frictional force acting on the block is G is equal to 9.8 meter per second. Option 1 is 2.5 Newton, option 2 is 0.98 Newton, option 3 is 4.9 Newton, option 4 is 0.49 Newton. So in this question, we need to know an important concept about static friction and kinetic friction. Then only we can understand this question. Okay, static friction, we know that static friction is changing friction, kinetic friction is a constant friction. But the real meaning behind this is static friction is acting on a body till a force we apply overcomes it. Okay, then after the force we applied overcomes the static friction, the friction become kinetic friction. The kinetic friction is a constant friction and the static friction is a changing friction. I can explain this by taking an example. If I given a force of 10 Newton, the static friction will be 10 Newton. When I applied a force of 30 Newton, the static friction was also keep changing into 30 Newton. Then the point where the static friction changes to kinetic friction is, take an example as 80 Newton. Okay, and now I am applying a force of 80 Newton. So the static friction will be changes into kinetic friction, and the kinetic friction, for example, kinetic friction becomes 80 Newton. Okay, 80 Newton. Kinetic friction become 80 Newton, or kinetic friction becomes 70 Newton. Okay, 70 Newton. Now I am applying a force of 100 Newton. Then also the kinetic friction will remain as 70 Newton. That's the difference between static and kinetic friction. Okay, how much force we given, that will be the static friction, and after a point static friction will not act. Okay, and after a point when we apply more force, the static friction changes into kinetic friction. Okay, this is an important point here. So now we can go to this question. Okay, in this question, a block of mass, the mass here it is 0.1 kilogram, right, is held against a wall by applying a horizontal force. Here horizontal force 5 Newton means a normal reaction. Okay, normal reaction, or the normal reaction same as this horizontal force is nothing anything other than that. Okay, now the coefficient of friction between the block, this block and this wall is 0.5. So the mu become 0.5. Okay, 0.5. Now we should able to find the frictional force, right? Now the first procedure of this frictional force is to find the static friction, right? Then only we can know that the force we applied changes static friction to kinetic friction or not. Okay, so we should find the static frictional force. So for the static frictional force, okay, we know the formula that Fs, that is small fs, is mu n, right? Mu n. This is a formula for the frictional force or static friction. Okay, static frictional force, right? So frictional force is equal to mu n, right? Static frictional force is equal to mu n. Now we have n, mu, etc. So frictional force, static frictional force is equal to 0.5 into 5, right? And that comes to be a total of 2.5, right? Yeah, there we get a static frictional force is 2.5. Now we know, but the applied this force is horizontal, right? That is a normal reaction. We shouldn't take that normal reaction in this question. Okay, we should consider the frictional force is there. Here is a frictional force, and the exact opposite force is the mg. That is the force which helps to prevent the block from falling down, right? So the mg, we should first calculate the mg, or that is the force. The weight is a force, right? Weight is a force which helps, the weight is a force which is preventing, okay, preventing the block from falling down. So force F is equal to mg, that is equal to 0.1 into 9.8, which is comes to a total of 0.98. Okay, now this is a force. If now I can take an example that I am applying a force of 0.98. The static friction is 2.5. Static friction is very greater than the applied force, so there is no chance. Okay, there is no chance for the static friction to change into kinetic friction. If the force is greater, like a force is said to be 3 newton, then the static friction can be changed into kinetic friction. But here the force is only 0.98 newton and the static friction is 2.5 newton, and the static friction is greater than the applied force. Okay, this is applied force. Okay, this is capital F. Okay, so the frictional force is same as that of the frictional force. So frictional force is equal to 0.98. Okay, that is I have said it in the beginning that the static friction keep changing with the force applied, right? So the force applied is 0.98, and this, so the friction will become 0.98 newton. So option number 2 is the answer. Thank you.